some weird things started happening. I really found myself in a kind of bad place.
Trent Reznor made some of the darkest music of the 1990s.
To this day, makes even some modern metal records sound tame by comparison.
He hated the music industry, hated himself, and nearly died trying to destroy both.
When fame presented itself to me, I was not equipped to deal with it in any way.
Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
And yet he survived long enough to even win an Oscar for the soundtrack to a Disney movie. This is the story of Trent Reznor. Michael Trent Reznor came out of Mercer in 1965. Mercer is one of those flat Rust Belt towns in Pennsylvania where people work, drink, go home, and slowly develop back problems before the age of 40. Nobody there was dreaming about becoming an avant-garde industrial rock icon. Anyway, Reznor's parents were teenagers when they had him. And guess what? It fell apart fast. When Trent was 6, they divorced and he got shipped off to live with his grandparents. His grandma got him piano lessons, and it became obvious pretty quickly that the kid had talent. Eventually, he also joined the school band, played tenor saxophone and tuba, and got heavily involved in theater. At one point, he was playing Judas in a Jesus Christ Superstar high school production. And honestly, Judas makes total sense for him. Even before 9 Inch Nails, Reznor gravitated toward emotionally conflicted, theatrical, and self-destructive themes. I mean, you can almost already see the DNA of his later work in that role. His classmates even voted him best in drama. In 1983, Reznor graduated high school and went to college for computer engineering, which also makes total sense because even decades later, his music would still sound less like jam sessions and more like somebody programming machines to make them feel pain. About a year in, he dropped out of college and started playing keyboards for some local bands. Then he moved to Cleveland and found a job at some keyboard store, which gave him a foot into that music scene. He played first with The Innocent, a mainstream rock band influenced by groups like Journey and Foreigner. They even opened shows for Bryan Adams. Then he joined the Exotic Birds, an artsy dance pop band. While playing with the Exotic Birds, Trent met John Malm Jr., a local promoter who basically became the first person to look at Trent Reznor and think he might actually become something. So, as Trent drifted from band to band, Malm became his de facto manager and helped him navigate the boring adult business side of music that most artists suck at. Anyway, after leaving the Exotic Birds, Trent threw himself into yet another group, Slam Bamboo.
Scene Magazine says about our next guest, this band has everything it takes to make it big. Doing their single now called House on Fire. Let's welcome Slam Bamboo.
Waking up to you.
But all those bands were never the point. Trent was actually obsessed with how records were built. Not just songwriting, but the manipulation of sound itself, the synthesizers and the distortion, and how to make electronics sound violent. Eventually, a studio owner who was a client in the store Reznor worked at offered him a job as a janitor and assistant engineer at his recording studio. So during the day, future industrial rock icon Trent Reznor was literally waxing floors, and hauling equipment around Cleveland. But at night, he would stay alone in the studio and record his own music.
You were working at Right Track's studio, right? And you were doing some engineering work there, and Bart, who's the owner of the studio, let you play around in your own time. Did you have any prior experience with the equipment that you had there, or did you teach yourself everything that you learned while you were there?
With keyboard stuff, I knew what I was doing, but with engineering, mixing, that type of stuff, I was kind of a rudimentary knowledge, but I taught myself engineering kind of, so not that I'm a great engineer, but I know my way around a bit now.
Did you have any intentions of...
Inspired by Ministry and Skinny Puppy, he programmed cold drum machines, stacked metallic synths, and screamed into microphones until the whole thing sounded less like music and more like ChatGPT having a nervous breakdown. The project would later become 9 Inch Nails, and it stayed mostly a solo project because almost nobody around him understood what the hell he was trying to make.
In the studio, 9 Inch Nails had been just me, because originally I couldn't find anybody else that was thinking the way I was thinking, and I was living in Cleveland, and there wasn't a lot of people thinking the same way, so I could just bitch about it and not do anything, or just do it myself. So I tried to do it myself, and it became kind of fun.
Meanwhile, Mom was mailing Reznor's demo tapes to labels, and as you can imagine, they wanted something easier to package and sell, until eventually TVT Records signed him and gave him freedom to make the music he wanted.
Just kind of hung out in my room and wrote some songs, and then at the same time I was working in a studio here in Cleveland, and this was the beginning of '88, and during the course of that year, the first 6 months of that year, kind of came up with the idea for 9 Inch Nails, and sent some tapes out, got a record deal, and by the end of that year.
So now he had studio access and a record deal, but he also had a gigantic logistical problem. 9 Inch Nails was literally just one deeply obsessive guy alone in a room at night programming drum machines, but to actually release an album and go on tour, he needed a band. To drag 9 Inch Nails out of the studio and onto a stage, Trent called an old friend he knew from Pennsylvania, Chris Vrenna, who joined the first lineup in 1988 as a keyboard player. Trent was on vocals and guitar, while a local musician named Ron Musara rounded out the group on drums.
And then got a band together to kind of play the stuff live, because I wanted to make it appear to the public to be a band, because I think it's more interesting. No, it was something I could hide behind in a way.
Soon after, the band landed its first tour opening for Skinny Puppy. The early shows were messy, and not everybody got what 9 Inch Nails was even supposed to be. And to be honest, some still don't. Anyway, after the Skinny Puppy tour, Musara left, so Vrenna moved from keyboards to drums, and guitarist Richard Patrick joined the lineup. The same Richard Patrick that would later become famous for starting Filter. From the beginning, there was a clear split. In the studio, 9 Inch Nails was just Reznor alone, controlling every detail himself. But for live shows, he needed actual humans, and that created a permanent tension from day one. Because suddenly, this intensely isolated creative process had to coexist with touring schedules, clashing personalities, exhaustion, egos, drugs, boredom, and the general psychological damage that happens when you lock musicians inside vehicles together for months. On October 20th, 1989, 9 Inch Nails released Pretty Hate Machine, and the title alone tells you almost everything. It was angry, bitter, obsessive, sexual, neurotic, and weirdly danceable all at the same time.
And did an album, and by myself.
Songs like Head Like a Hole, Terrible Lie, and Down in It combined strong pop hooks with lyrics that basically sounded like somebody fighting God, society, and their own nervous system simultaneously.
It just made sense to write about something I could speak about with authority, which is how I felt about whatever it might be. It might be a relationship, might be my religion or lack of religion, might be just things in general that bothered me, more so than things that made me happy, because if I was happy, I wouldn't be motivated to sit and write about it personally.
To understand what was innovative about this, you need a little context. In 1989, industrial music existed. Bands like Ministry and Skinny Puppy had been doing dark, aggressive electronic music for years, but it was niche stuff. It wasn't mainstream, and honestly, a lot of it didn't even seem interested in being enjoyable. The whole point was often to sound harsh, uncomfortable, and confrontational. Then, Trent Reznor showed up and accidentally committed the genre's greatest act of betrayal. He made it catchy. Pretty Hate Machine still had the paranoia, the machine sounds, the aggression, the psychological collapse, but now there were choruses stuck in your head for 3 days.
Were you aware of the fact that you were breaking new ground at the time you were doing it?
I don't think this is really breaking new ground. I think it's, or in English, ground. I think it's introducing a few elements into certain genres that you don't normally hear, like lyric matter. And some of the lyrics in this stuff I don't think is what you normally hear with more aggressive industrial synth type stuff. I don't think I've done anything amazingly new. I think what I've done is make a record that is more accessible than one might think at first.
The album spread mostly through word of mouth, college radio, and later MTV. It took 2 years to go gold, but it kept selling, reaching people who recognized that specific mix of anger, loneliness, and the feeling of not quite knowing why.
The first album, I was very embarrassed in a way, not of what I'd done, but just of the fact that I was exposing myself, But could kind of tell myself, well, it doesn't, 10,000 people are going to buy this record. At least I think I've made an honest statement. Then it grows up, things started escalating. And it's kind of a weird feeling when you meet somebody and they read, I totally relate to everything you said, and you know exactly how I feel.
Interestingly, the album also accidentally triggered an FBI murder investigation. During the filming of the Down in It video, Reznor spent the day lying around in fake blood while the crew tried getting aerial footage attaching a camera to a weather balloon. Then, the balloon floated away, like a cursed art school project, and vanished.
I'm laying on the ground. We had cameras, Super 8 cameras with weather balloons hooked up to them with helium. Start the camera, let the balloon go, and it had a string, we could pull it back down. And then when we do the footage backwards, it looks like the camera drops onto my head. But the first time we did it, the ropes broke and the balloon flew off into nowhere.
Michigan.
Sometime later, a farmer found the camera footage, handed it to police, and suddenly federal investigators were staring at grainy video of a pale body, wondering if they'd stumbled onto an actual homicide.
The Michigan State Police, the Chicago Police, the FBI spent more than a year investigating the case, trying to determine who the victim was and what had happened to him. They even sent out flyers to area schools in hope of generating leads.
In the end, after a year of investigations, they figured it out.
When the news came through that, this was some sort of cult killing, I'd been killed, this great story. Initial reaction was it was really funny. Something could be that blown out of proportion and this many people worked up about it. And I felt kind of good that the police had made idiots of themselves,
Eventually, Pretty Hate Machine sold more than 3 million copies in the United States. For an independent release with no big label machine behind it, that was almost unheard of.
I mean, we were bigger then than I thought we'd be, and I'd hoped we'd be that big, 8, 9 years from now.
thinking in terms of a long career.
Reznor suddenly found himself famous, which he handled terribly.
I can armchair analyze myself, but at the time when fame presented itself to me, I was not at a point in my own life where I was equipped to deal with it in any way. And I had a built-in sense of not being good enough that I've carried with me from whatever it's come from.
Not because fame corrupted him overnight, but because fame has a way of amplifying whatever was already in someone. And what was already in Reznor was perfectionism, control issues, obsession, self-destruction, isolation, and massive insecurity hiding underneath the aggression.
I didn't feel confident. I thought the act of writing was terrifying, and self-examination with a close-up mirror and an antiseptic environment and that's kind of what 9 Inch Nails was based on.
And then the music industry made it worse. Before Pretty Hate Machine blew up, TVT founder Steve Gottlieb had reportedly dismissed the album as an abortion, but once it started selling millions, suddenly the label wanted more of the same, and fast. But Trent had zero interest in making Pretty Hate Machine Part 2. He wanted the music to become darker, heavier, uglier. That disagreement quickly created tension between Reznor and the label. They didn't want to release the new tracks he was working on, and he didn't want to produce the music they expected from him.
It just became a very unproductive situation, and any ideas I would come up with would have to go through this elaborate okaying process, to the point where making music or making anything to do with records was not fun. It was not enjoyable. There was quite an animosity on both parties. Anything I would want, they would not let me do, and I have to do the opposite just because it was a clash of personalities and a general lack of understanding as to what the music was about.
And at the exact same time, he had to keep touring constantly because the music industry has always depended heavily on touring. Albums build an audience, but live performances are what allow most bands to actually make a living. In the summer of 1991, 9 Inch Nails landed a slot on the very first Lollapalooza, which, especially at the time, was a big deal. Lollapalooza was a new traveling festival cramming some of the best alternative acts in America onto the same stage.
And we'd gone from being a small little underground band to playing on Lollapalooza and getting big in a strange way where it was uncomfortable.
9 Inch Nails performed covered in their trademark cornstarch, destroyed equipment at the end of the set, and brought Ice-T on stage to play guitar on Head Like a Hole. The shows were physically chaotic, band members tackling each other, equipment getting smashed, blood occasionally involved. Their performance massively increased their profile with both audiences and major record labels. But by the end of the tour, the band was falling apart.
And then that band toured for a couple of years, and then we just kind of imploded upon each other, and we got sick of each other. And
they were exhausted, and Trent was becoming increasingly obsessive and difficult to be around. He hated the music industry and was already starting to feel trapped by his own success.
I thought at that point that 9 Inch Nails was pretty much over.
Reznor went back to the studio, except he was still at war with TVT. So he approached the problem the same way any emotionally stable person would, by secretly recording new stuff using fake names, so the label couldn't legally claim ownership of the sessions. He started working across different studios in New Orleans, Miami, Hollywood, and Chicago, but one location became infamous. In 1992, Trent rented a house in Beverly Hills and turned it into a studio. A few weeks later, a friend recognized it from photos in Helter Skelter, the book about the Manson murders. They were recording inside the Sharon Tate murder house, even though, according to Trent, he didn't know before moving in.
But the way we found out about that place was I was looking for a house to put a studio in temporarily to record a record instead of going to a real studio. And I was going to do it in New Orleans, where I was living, but couldn't find a place that met all the requirements of big enough, not next to neighbors, so you can make noise. Came out to LA for a day and saw like 10 houses in a row, and that was one of them. And at the end of the day, we just decided that was pretty much the coolest one. We didn't know at the time, that was it.
But after finding out, he decided to fully lean into the bad mojo and even named the studio Le Pig, after the word written in blood at the murder scene.
If you're there in the day, it's not too, it's what you juxtapose upon the place. But occasionally, we become numb to it because we're there all the time. But if you start to think about it, and a lot of times there's a lot of weird, just things happen. Equipment has a tendency to break 20 times more often than it does anywhere else, I think. Weird sounds, things like that, which of course you in your mind turn into being,
Ghosts.
this is it, you know.
The baby's here.
Exactly.
Inside that house, Trent filmed the Gave Up video and started shaping the sound of the Downward Spiral. But first he released Broken, his second album, in 1992. Although technically it was meant to be only an EP, but today it's largely considered to be Nine Inch Nails' second album. Trent took the record to Interscope, who helped him break free from TVT and set up his own label, Nothing Records, as part of the deal.
Well, the idea of Nothing, my record label, is basically just a shell for Nine Inch Nails to operate within. And again, coming from a bad situation of not being entrusted to any creative decision that regards your own music or anything else, and understanding the oppression and the terrible mindset that you get into and the very unconstructive ways you have to just deal with. I have an idea, but to get it out, you have to filter it through a bunch of idiots that you don't respect, and they don't respect you, and it's a nightmare. Coming from that, we became very self-contained, and that probably added to my reputation of being a control freak or megalomaniac or whatever it is, But when we got our new deal with Interscope, we just made it clear, we know what we want to do, just let us do it. No offense, I don't even know who works for you, and the company's probably pretty good, and we have since found out that it is excellent. But we went into it with a very clear mindset of, we know what we want, let us do it. Give us a chunk of money, we'll give you a finished album with artwork, with singles, with videos, and you don't have to worry about us, and we'll take care of ourselves.
The guitars became pure abrasion. The vocals sounded genuinely scary. The whole record felt compressed, trapped, furious, like the album was actively overheating while you listened to it.
I just read a review where someone claimed that it was all about my record label and how much I hated everything, and every song reflected that. And I never consciously thought of that, but I think that element, it's definitely in there. That was a definite factor involved in it.
And then something hilarious happened. The song Wish won a Grammy for Best Heavy Metal Performance in 1992. The music industry had officially celebrated a man who couldn't stand the music industry itself and had literally recorded the album under fake names to escape its control.
Where do you keep your Grammy that you won for Wish? Where do you store that?
I was just thinking about that the other day. I don't really have a home at the moment, and last I saw it was at the Tate House somewhere, so it's in a box.
So it's not something that you carry around like in your bag and look at every day and know you've accomplished something?
Honestly, it's flattering to get an award like that, but that doesn't mean anything, because who votes on that? It's out-of-touch music business people and other Grammy winners.
Right. Aren't you nominated again?
For something, and we won't win, so.
What are you nominated for?
But while he was being celebrated, Reznor was already working on something darker than anything he'd done before.
This is what it feels like.
On March 8th, 1994, The Downward Spiral came out. It was a concept album, a complete story told start to finish, about one person's psychological collapse ending with him taking his own life.
I realized that it wasn't going to be a big commercial success type record. There wasn't any real singles on there. And it worked as a chunk of art, I thought, but not so much as someone say, let me hear something off your new record. And it was like, better to just hear the whole thing a couple times and understand what's going on rather than, here's a song off it, but you don't see the importance of that song unless you see how it sits in the whole thing.
14 tracks, over an hour of music and pain. The protagonist isn't named because he doesn't need to be. The arc is the point.
And what great music it is. With the first album, the focus was primarily on synthesizers. And then the follow-up EP, it was more of a hard swing towards guitars. On The Downward Spiral, Trent gets the balance just right.
It debuted at number 2 on the Billboard chart and sold 4 million copies. For a record that opens with distorted machinery sounds and ends with a man describing himself as a needle that tears a hole, those are enormous numbers.
To this day, The Downward Spiral makes even some modern industrial and metal records sound tame by comparison.
4, 3, happy 1994!
To understand why it landed so hard, you need to remember what 1994 felt like. Nirvana had blown the doors off mainstream rock 3 years earlier by proving that dark, uncomfortable music could be enormous. Kurt Cobain died in April 1994.
Hi, I'm Kurt Loder with an MTV News special report on a very sad day. Kurt Cobain, the leader of one of rock's most gifted and promising bands, Nirvana.
And the whole alternative rock world was in a kind of collective shock. The culture was hungry for music that felt honest about pain, not polished over it. Reznor gave them something that went even further than Nirvana. Where Cobain sounded like someone who desperately wished things were different, Reznor sounded like someone who had accepted the worst about himself and was cataloging the damage in real time. It was uncomfortable and painful, but he had also figured out how to make it commercially viable without watering it down.
And I hope I never get to a place where the commerce of it and the business of it and the career concern taints what's been always kept me feeling like a very true, And it gets into sounding pretentious talking about that, but I know I've meant what I've had to say, and that gives me the courage to go out and present it to people and not feel like, not that I don't feel a bit delicate at times about it.
You can draw a line from 9 Inch Nails directly to the alternative rock wave of the late 90s and early 2000s, including Korn, Linkin Park, and obviously Marilyn Manson, and to the way film scores now treat electronic distortion and silence as emotional instruments. Without Reznor, a huge section of alternative music would sound different. But while all that success was piling up publicly, privately he was starting to come apart.
There's some weird things started happening, and I really found myself in a kind of bad place.
Like what happened?
Some friendships dissolved. I was really, really unhappy. I was really disillusioned with a lot of things, and I didn't trust anybody.
The Self-Destruct tour, which ran from 1994 to 1996, was when his addictions really escalated. Alcohol was already part of the picture, and so was cocaine. But now heroin entered it too.
An easy way to fit in was to self-medicate, and after a while, self-medication started to stifle anything creative or good that I had, including my ability to even like myself.
He moved from the Sharon Tate house to a converted funeral home in New Orleans. He turned into a recording and production facility called Nothing Studios. There, he produced Marilyn Manson's Portrait of an American Family and Antichrist Superstar.
The good thing is that Trent, being an artist, respects the artist's point of view. So he happens to be the only person in the music industry that I trust, and they gave us the opportunity to put out our record completely raw and unexpurgated, and we didn't have to censor ourselves, and that was the most important thing, because it's not worth it for me to do this unless we do it the way that I want to do it.
The next 9 Inch Nails album took 5 years.
And I think when you're surrounded by the situations we placed ourselves into every night for 2 years, you emerge a different person, and that was a person I didn't know that well, and I wasn't sure I wanted to get to know that guy that well. So I found myself kind of floundering in a place where I was avoiding starting my new album.
During that time, Reznor essentially disappeared inside his own addictions and grief. His grandmother, the woman who had raised him, the one who'd signed him up for piano lessons when he was a child, died.
I was dealing with death of someone very close to me.
Your grandmother, huh?
Yeah, who raised me. And I didn't deal with it. I just put it off because I didn't know how to deal with it. No one ever died around me.
The Fragile, released in 1999, was partly shaped by that loss, alongside the growing weight of heroin, cocaine, and alcohol.
A lot of people have been talking since you released The Fragile about how long it took to make this album, blah, blah, blah. I think you've got a lot of over-anxious fans out there who are waiting for it for a very long time. But having listened to it, 2 CDs over 100 minutes, 23 songs, and just the breadth of emotion that you deal with, I'm quite amazed that you finished it at all.
It was a double album. It was sprawling, ambient, sad, and strange. Less about rage, more about drowning and suffocating. Songs like The Day the World Went Away and I'm Looking Forward to Joining You Finally were outpourings of grief over his grandmother's death. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard chart, beating the Backstreet Boys' Millennium. But critics were divided. Some called it a masterpiece, while others felt it needed an editor badly. Both things were true. It was a double album built by a man disappearing inside his own machinery, and it felt exactly like that.
I was kind of burnt out, and I didn't feel that passion about starting a new album, so I kind of wasted time for a while. About a year, I did some soundtrack stuff and put off starting the new album. When I finally did start it, I stumbled into some new things that just took me to new places, and then it went on and on and on and on, and wound up being this record.
The album was about falling apart, because the man who made it was falling apart in real time.
I know firsthand how distorted this lifestyle can get. Traveling, being on tour is an isolating experience and weird. That's probably outside the norm of what traditional occupations are.
It came to a head in 2000 during the Fragility Tour at a tour stop in London. Reznor mistook China White heroin for cocaine and overdosed. He was eventually found in his hotel room, but he woke up in a hospital with no memory of what had happened. In July 2001, Reznor finally hit the brakes on touring, recording, and the whole chaotic orbit around 9 Inch Nails and checked himself into rehab.
No, I just feel, as an adult, you have a responsibility to yourself to handle your business, take care of yourself.
One of the people who helped pull Reznor out of his self-destructive spiral was David Bowie. The two had actually met in the summer of 1995.
I got into what he was doing, and then Downward Spiral was really, I thought, just an exceptional album.
Bowie invited Nine Inch Nails to join the North American leg of his Outside tour.
Such a charming gentleman that I was instantly at ease. And he mentioned his idea of doing this tour, and of course at that time it was only, 3 shows or a couple cities. And it got me thinking about it, and then I realized that it would be something that it'd be a challenge to do, and I think then it would be a challenge to present the whole show in a unique way. So it's not just opening acts, headline act, but it's something that was a bit unusual that would make it make sense in a way.
The 2 acts structured the shows as a kind of 2-act play. Nine Inch Nails opened, then both bands played together for a 5-song section in the middle, then Bowie closed. It ran for 68 dates. Reznor later said he was terrified of Bowie at first. What he found instead was someone who had been through a brutal drug addiction, claustrophobic fame, and still came out the other side intact and happily married even.
In the sense that this mentor type figure knew he was there and had been that kind of North Star creatively and personally.
Bowie's role to him was kind of mentor, big brother, and friend. It didn't fix things immediately because nothing does, but it probably planted a seed that contributed to Reznor taking some years off the spotlight to work on his sobriety.
I'm not anti-drug for anybody, and if people want to drink or do drugs, that's their business, and I have no right to comment on any of that. And for me, I can speak with authority about me personally, that, I turned to drinking and eventually drugs as a way to not feel bad, not feel bad about myself. I never went into it with an intention of becoming reliant upon it or ruining my life in the process. And I'm sure most people that do that start with the same agenda.
He came back in 2005 with Teeth, the first Nine Inch Nails album made after getting sober, and its release carried extra weight because it answered a question hanging over Trent Reznor's career: whether the intensity of his music depended on the self-destruction that had nearly consumed him. Commercially, the answer was immediate, with Teeth debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, giving Nine Inch Nails one of its biggest mainstream moments. The Hand That Feeds, especially, was one of the most recognizable Nine Inch Nails singles of that era, a compact little weapon that took the band's anger, stripped the fat off it, and shoved it onto alternative rock radio without sanding away the part that made it obviously stubbornly Reznor. Most importantly, Reznor proved he didn't have to keep destroying himself to make great art.
And I bought into the idea for quite some time that, I was the tortured artist that needed to be a little bit drunk or a little bit high to come up with good ideas, and that romantic idea that that's part of the creative process. And that also haunted me after my life spun out of control, when the way that it affected me negatively on top of everything else was I couldn't write. I couldn't think straight, and whatever talent I had musically, my ability to finish a thought, really take it and dig deep into myself was gone. It was like my head was filled with cotton.
Then came Year Zero in 2007, a concept album imagining a near future America sliding into total surveillance, propaganda, theocratic authoritarianism, and everyday violence.
I wanted to break away from the idea of opening up my journal and transferring that into song lyrics. And I really thought about what was at the forefront of my concern. And, at the state I'm at right now, at the age I'm at, just the state of being an American citizen, a lot of concern I have about the direction our country's headed in. And kind of the erosion of freedoms that it seems like we're experiencing, and the way that we treat the rest of the world and our own citizens felt like something I needed to comment on. And I wanted to do it in a way that didn't feel preachy and it didn't feel rooted in 2007.
But the more interesting story was how he released it. On Valentine's Day 2007, at 9 Inch Nails' first ever concert in Portugal, a USB drive turned up in a venue bathroom. It contained a new, unreleased song which fans immediately posted online. A few days later in Barcelona, another drive appeared with another new song and a burst of static. When fans analyzed the frequency with a spectrogram, it revealed a phone number. The rabbit hole went on for weeks, with clues about the new album hidden across cryptic websites, MP3s, and phone recordings.
It has a puzzle-esque aspect to it, but the real thing is about people discussing and finding these pieces, discussing how they tie together, and finding out how it's rooted in the world of today. There's no topic I'm discussing in the story that isn't already in motion to some degree. And it's been something that if I just put an essay out and you read it, okay. But if it's something where you see examples of these characters and these people in this world, almost as if they're real, with real world kind of documents of it, whether it be an audio clip or a movie or a website or a journal entry of people from this world, to make it more of a visceral experience. And it wasn't something dreamed up as a way to get you to buy a CD. You know, it's functioned as a marketing campaign by its nature, but it wasn't born from that. It was born from me hiring some people that I paid for myself to say, help me get this out in the world in the coolest, most subversive, detailed, intricate, insane way possible to mankind.
This was 2007. Most artists were still arguing about whether iTunes was going to destroy the music industry, while Reznor was literally playing 4D chess with his audience, making Year Zero feel bigger than a record and more like a live unfolding system of paranoia.
Before there's any real revolution, it's the last gasp of these labels trying to hold on to whatever power they have, which a lot of that was taken away with distribution. You know, the internet has now replaced their stranglehold on that with anyone can do it.
A year later, with no announcement and no promotional cycle, 9 Inch Nails dropped Ghosts 1 through 4 directly on their website. 36 instrumental tracks licensed under Creative Commons, allowing anyone to sample and rework them for non-commercial purposes.
Almost 2 hours of instrumental and ambient works that I find to be pretty captivating. Really solid work here on par with a lot of my favorite 90s instrumental moments, and again, the Still EP, while also alluding to future directions Trent would go with his soundtrack work. In fact, some of these songs were even reworked for The Social Network.
2 months later, he did it again. The Slip, a full rock album, released as a surprise free download on May 5th, 2008.
Easily the best post-90s album from start to finish. So
this was before Spotify existed. The music industry was still suing teenagers for downloading MP3s. Reznor had already moved past the argument entirely and started building something else. Then, he and his collaborator Atticus Ross started making film scores.
Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
And won the Academy Award for Best Original Score for The Social Network in 2011. Reznor had spent 30 years making music that sounded like anxiety interacting with technology, so obviously he was the right person to score a film about Mark Zuckerberg. Then The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, then Gone Girl, then Soul, for which Reznor and Ross won another Oscar shared with John Batiste, and then Challengers more recently.
This whole thing with the soundtrack or scoring this film has really been like a breath of fresh air. You know, it feels like a real reinvention and it's exciting, you know, it's felt good.
But film scoring wasn't a replacement for 9 Inch Nails, it was an extension of it. In 2013, 9 Inch Nails released Hesitation Marks and later an acclaimed trilogy of EPs not the actual events, add violence, and bad witch. And somewhere in between, Atticus Ross became the only official Nine Inch Nails member other than Reznor himself. They also landed the 2019 CMA Award for Musical Event of the Year after a piece of one of their tracks got baked into the Old Town Road beat. That's the thing about Reznor's music. It's bigger than the context it was made in. And Hurt is the best example of this. When Johnny Cash covered it in 2002, he was 70 years old, dying, and he sang the song as if he'd written it himself.
Johnny Cash could juxtapose his life against my words in that song, and just felt incredibly powerful, and just felt really privileged to be involved in that in whatever abstract way that I was, you know. And sad that it became the context in his life, and which context it ended up becoming at the end of his life. But it's a very flattering situation to have somebody that's such an immense talent and icon as him, and great songwriter, asked to sing your song, and then him turning it into this thing that really beautiful. And it felt like it felt really, at the time, it felt really comforting and like a pat on the back in a way of like, you know, you can do this, get out there and write an album, and you know, it felt good to me. I'm very flattered to be involved in that whole situation.
Meanwhile, Reznor himself has changed in ways that would have been unimaginable to anyone watching him roll around in mud at Woodstock in 1994. Marriage, 5 children, sobriety, Oscars, a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 2020, and even a Disney collaboration. Here was a lonely kid from a flat town in western Pennsylvania spending decades trying to build sounds violent enough to match what was happening inside his own head. Sometimes those sounds turned into songs. Sometimes they turned into film scores. And sometimes they got so close to the source that they almost killed him. And while a lot of rock stars survive long enough to become boring cliches of the past version of themselves, Reznor kept reinventing himself long enough to become something rarer than a rock star. He became a complete artist.